My name is Karen Linson Chillcott. I have a Chinese middle name, Meng Mei. It's not pronounced the way that it is spelled. I'm originally from Tallahassee, Florida, first born in the United States from both sides of my family, and I currently live in Huntsville, Alabama. I have Victory Alliance Ranch, which is a combination, it's a rescue for people and horses and other critters that wind up here as well. I've been doing that for the last 9 years on the side because I also have to work in order to feed all of the animals. I'm up to about 70 equines on the property now, and I work with challenged people with an emphasis on Special Olympic equestrians, but I also work with folks with MS and then a lot with combat veterans that are dealing with PTSD and traumatic brain injury. And then their families are welcome out here as well. The first time I was sitting on a pony, I was 3 years old. And my sister and other friends overseas actually reminded me later, but apparently when I was 15, I informed my family and my parents in particular that someday I would have 50 horses. My sister remembers that clearly because she loves horses as well. Fast forward, my first husband was an RCA rodeo cowboy, and then after that divorce, I pretty much swore off cowboys, wound up being married to somebody in the military. So I was away from horses for almost 30 years. Spent the last 10 years in hazard zones to include active war zones, peacekeeping missions in Bosnia, and then later in Iraq and Afghanistan. And then I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2004. In 2009, I was told by 3 separate doctors that you are in remission. If you want to stay that way, you need to come out of combat zones. Working 116 hours a week is not conducive to staying healthy. So I came back to the States trying to figure out what I was going to do. I hadn't moved back yet. I came back on an R&R vacation and got on the internet and found pictures of an Arabian stallion that had been shot as a yearling by a deer poacher. Spent an hour and a half on the phone with the breeder, who was explaining that she couldn't sell him to just anybody. She had to sell him to somebody that understood what gunshots were because she was afraid he'd always be afraid of them. And I said, well, we just fight for the foxhole together. And so the first step of my dream of having a gray Arabian stallion began with me buying him sight unseen, like a total novice, and asking her to keep him for 6 months until I figured out where I was going to live. Because I had a cabin in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia, and I had a place in Houston. And then I wound up moving to Huntsville, Alabama, and moving him and a mare that I bought with him there. Now I had the stallion and a mare that was in foal to him. He got injured at the place I was boarding him, and so I found a place to buy, and I started just looking around at what was going on with our veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. And I'm Vietnam era age. So I came up with this brilliant idea that I was going to have horses and I was going to work with wounded warriors. That quickly augmented into Special Olympics when a woman pulled onto my property when the blacksmith was there working on my stallion, and this crazy woman, and I say crazy because she's 20 years older than me, so she is pushing the upper 80s. She was the equine judge for the state of Alabama for Special Olympics, and she would not leave and explain to me why I had to get involved in Special Olympics. And I threatened to kick her off the property, and she just backed up 2 steps and said, I'm not going anywhere until you agree to do this. And therein began a long-term friendship. We're wonderful friends now. And it's a wonderful relationship with the military guys because they're service members for a reason. So a lot of the guys that can't really function completely do wonderfully with the special needs folks, and the special needs folks are not the standard. I mean, when they ask what happened to you, it's not the standard curiosity. It's just a very factual, what happened to you? Oh, cool. Okay. And off they go. So it's worked into a great relationship. And then you have the military kids whose one or both parents were impacted by the combat zones that come out here. And so they get involved also at the ranch. And then you mix that with rescued horses that have their own trauma, and they all work really well together. Some easier than others, but overall they all work well together. And that's how it began. I've been doing this since I started the ranch. I founded it in this part of it since 2010, and I haven't charged anybody. I've been able to fund it myself. Like I said, 10 years in combat zones, I had the money to be able to do it. However, since I am currently unemployed, I'm upping my timeline to get my 501c3 nonprofit status in place. I'm a nonprofit in Alabama, but not an IRS one, so that I can get more funding going to take care of the horses. But that's it in a nutshell. It's helping others, which has greatly helped me. I was just watching the TV series I had recorded, SEAL Team, and he's actually talking about, you know what to do in combat zones. You do. It's coming back in the quiet when nobody's shooting at you. And it took me, a young man who did 4 or 5 tours overseas. He was what they call a CB with construction battalion. He brought his RV and lived on the ranch for about 6 months because he grew up on a farm in Iowa. And so he helped a lot on the ranch in exchange for not paying to be out here. He made me watch the movie Restrepo. It took him 2 months to get me to watch it. I bought the movie right away, but I wouldn't watch it. He comes out for our morning brief before he goes to work at 6 in the morning, and I'm out there on a cot with both German Shepherds covered in horse blankets that are dirty. And he started laughing. He said, "So you watched the movie last night?" And I cussed him from 8 ways to Sunday. And he said, "At some point you had to admit you're dealing with PTSD too." So that's when I've never gone anywhere for therapy. The horses are my therapy, but it made me recognize triggers. And then for me, I go long periods of time because I wasn't doing a lot of stuff still with the military, just on the periphery. And then one night at, it was probably midnight, because I'm known for being out on my pastures with the horses at weird hours. I remembered I'd left a gate shut. I am walking out in a starless night, halfway to that one pasture, and all at once I realized my head is in Bagram, Afghanistan, where we're taking rocket attacks. And then I heard the 6 horses coming at a run, and that brings you, and what you need to do is get yourself back into the present the minute you start going through an episode. And that was an immediate yank me back to the present. I start breathing normally. I open the gate, turn around, and a car coming down the road, the headlights caught me right in the eyes, and I jumped into the bushes. 5 of the 6 horses ran in the opposite direction. The 6th one, who is a registered Russian Budny that I raised on the ranch, which is known as, they're the Russian war horse, he dove into the bushes with me and kept breathing on me, basically, "Mom, are you okay?" And I just burst into tears because he brought me back, but I realized his instincts took over. He had never been trained to do what Budnys are known to do. My older mares do it, but he just was my baby at 7 years old. And so he walked me all the way back up to the barn, and he kept repositioning himself. And it wasn't until we got all the way up there before I realized what he had done, because he's so big, is make sure he stood between me and the light, so that I didn't have any more episodes. And then he just put his nose to mine, basically like my stallion often does, put on your big girl panties, get over it, and took off. So I sent him out for more professional training after that, and we're growing him and possibly selling him. But that has just reaffirmed my commitment. I'm planning to go back out to the Combat Veterans Center and take some brochures and invite the guys back out again, because I've been big time word of mouth, simply because I don't charge. And supporting these guys and gals, it takes a lot of emotional effort, because they know I know what they've been through. So a lot of the time, the biggest compliment I ever had was one of the former snipers that spent 18 months in Walter Reed after being blown up and has a metal plate in his head. He said, you put together the most impromptu, informal, but productive support group for PTSD I've ever been involved in. Because there's no judgment, there are no real schedules, they get to come and go. Several of them have permission to just send me a text saying, I'm going to be at the barn, it's me coming through the gates. And because I know they've had enough scheduling in the military. Some are still active duty, most are not. And so they'll disappear on me for weeks and sometimes months. A few of them who know me well enough, I'll be sitting working at the computer, and all at once the back door opens and they just walk in to say, hey, I'm back in town, after they scare the patoots out of me. But it's just it's a link that we have. It's something that you share in common. So it's a hard transition. I would say it takes a minimum of 2 to 3 years to get used to a lot of things. I'm pretty quick to say it doesn't matter if I forget something. I'm in America and I have plastic, I can go buy it. Because you got a Walmart or a Target or a McDonald's. If you have plastic or cash, you can get anything. And people who complain about this country just do not understand the abundance that we have. You can go to a faucet and drink the water. That's the thing that I cherish more than absolutely anything else around here. And you have refrigeration if you want it. So if you haven't spent a lot of time in third world countries, I always recommend people do either mission trips, or don't go on a cruise ship, go somewhere to make a difference and get out there with people, and you will have a huge new understanding of, while this country certainly is not perfect and we have things to work on, we have so many more things going for us than most other countries do, particularly women. There's still plenty of countries that women can't even own property. Kosovo, however, has made great strides since the war, but a lot of other countries. Overseas, at the beginning, it was government compliance, which translates making sure that the defense contractor I worked for was in compliance with the contract that it had. It wasn't a quality control, it was making sure all the contract provisions were done. So I was out in the field when they were constructing things. I was dealing with human resources, talking to the contracts administrators, dealing with accounting and finance, and dealing with auditors. Later, when I went into Iraq, I later became the executive director for the LOGCAP 3 contract, which was a $33 billion contract. And we had, I think, 60-something thousand employees that included subcontractors, and I was over that. So government compliance also worked for me. And we had all the shared services types of things, cost estimating, project controls, human resources. But I also had some duties with project managements, and so logistics is my life. I was just immersed in a lot of different things, and I loved it. Absolutely. I would not have come out of combat zones. As a friend of mine said, it's a toxic lifestyle because everything is up front. You take people at face value. You don't delve into a lot of things. You're surviving, and you're working a minimum of 12 hours a day most of the time, and often more than that. You don't have to worry about the other stuff, and you have to deal with real life when you come back. So and that's where horses are wonderful, because they live in the present also. They remember some things, and they're certainly prey animals, which works well with PTSD because they're in a constant state of PTSD. And so people that have no experience with horses, but have experience with complex PTSD from more than just combat, and certainly combat PTSD, it's very easy to explain to a combat veteran. What would you do if somebody came up behind you that you weren't expecting and they touched you? I'd kill them. Okay. Horses' hind feet can kill you. I mean, you run around most of the time in Forest Con Delta where you've got 3 to 4 weapons on you at any given time, and they'll look at me funny and go, I know you're carrying. It's okay, but just don't pull it when the kids are around. And so the horse is that way all the time. And they have forged some really great relationships with the horses, not necessarily riding, just grooming, talking to, getting out in the pastures with them. It's been pretty phenomenal. Absolutely. I'm also a certified equine specialist with EGALA, which does not ride. It's the Equine Assisted Growth and Learning Association, and there is no riding with that. There's a different therapy group NARHA, North American Rehabilitative something, maybe Horse Association, I don't remember, but they do a lot of riding. Igalo, you don't ride. Now, do I also help them ride? Yes. But my focus is far more on the non-riding. With the Special Olympic equestrians, they do ride, mostly on lead lines. I've had a few that have progressed where they can ride independently. But horses, for the most part, where there's a lot of childhood trauma, because I deal with that quite a bit, and a lot of broken families, the relationship between the horse and the person is what matters the most. Riding is strictly a side bonus, and a few of them ride well and have come up. I've got a young lady that has been with me for 5 years that's starting to ride really well, but it takes a long time, and you've got a lot of kids that come in and they just want to hop on a horse and go, and I've got too many rescue horses. I don't put up with that. You have to learn how. For me, it's much more important for the teenagers these days to learn responsibility. You want a horse? Okay. This is what you have to do to take care of that horse. You muck the stalls, you fill the hay bales, you know, you do all these other things. And they're like, I don't want to do the work. I just want to ride. Well, you don't get to ride until you've done the work. So it gets, and they have to keep their grades up, because I've had some of them that wound up not getting to come to the ranch until they pull their grades back up. The real barn rat, as they're called, these mostly girls love the mucking of the stuff. They'll walk into a barn and go, oh, I love the smell of horse poop. And I've actually had a few that started at 13 walking in going, ew. And a year later, I actually have them out there riding in, surfing on top of the manure pile in the wheelbarrow. And I'm going, what are you doing? Well, horse poop's not bad. Okay. A year ago, all you were doing. And then they clean out the water troughs by putting on their bathing suits and getting in the water trough. You know, they just become immersed in the farm life. And a lot of the time I'm taking phones away. I keep swear it's a safety issue to have a phone if you get in trouble, but at the same time, it's a safety issue if what you're doing is standing there paying attention to the phone and not what the horse is doing around you. So there's a lot of yelling that goes on my part. We laugh about it. They have a good nature because they know I love them to death. I have a 29-year-old that is on the spectrum. He holds 2 jobs and he rides. He has been involved for over 20 years in Special Olympics. He went through the whole puberty, all sorts of things. And it was a challenge from the time he was little with his parents teaching him. But he is so responsible and so proud that he lives in a group home and that he is self-sufficient in many ways. And he comes to ride for 1 hour, but he stays for 5 hours at a time when he's here. He does chores, he helps. And he is just adored. I have 1 or 2 that will never be able to really help. They'll only be able to ride. But they have already made advances on what they're able to do from the time they first started riding until now. And then I have others that I have to put my foot down. No, you don't get to ride for free if you don't start doing some chores, because they're perfectly capable of it. But often you have, somebody told me, hovercraft parents that want everything swept out of the way for their kids and want to make it perfect, and life is not perfect, and they don't want them to do chores because they can't really do that. Yes, they can. And then I literally, often I will have to tell the parents to go stand out front and stop giving direction because the child is focused on the parent rather than me. And at one point I was having a real disciplinary issue with one girl, and I'd raised my voice, and she was like, I'm not getting off the horse, and the mother's giving instruction. I had to turn around and tell the mother not to talk anymore. And the little girl then said again, I am not getting off of the horse. And I said, if I have to reach up and drag your ass off the horse, you will get off the horse, or you will do it the way I told you to. She takes a deep breath. She did it the way I told her to, and then looked at me and started jumping up and down and hugging me, going, I did it, I did it, I did it. And she does it right now, because once she did it once, she was fine. And as we walked out of the arena, the mother said to me, 2 years at the other place, they could never get her to do it. And I said, if I'd known we were having that problem, I would have already handled it. And she goes, Well, I just told the instructor, just don't push her. And I said, no, she's capable of doing more. But you have to, as Temple Brandon says, it's a fine line between forcing the issue and getting them to stretch and building their confidence as they do. But it's really remarkable how it can work out. I, I actually, you asked how I got into it. One of the catalysts for working with the kids, besides that very persistent equine director, was a gentleman, John Downey, that I had worked with for many years in Houston, then in Bosnia, and then in Iraq. And I learned that his granddaughter had been diagnosed with Down syndrome when she was very little. They told his daughter that they might as well institutionalize her, that she was going to have a heart operation. She wouldn't live past 3. And I think she was just a toddler at the time. And her mother, Heather, looked at the doctors and said, thank you for your input. Got up and walked out the door and drove to an equine therapy place near where she lived in Arizona. And the child was young enough that you had to have 3 people, 1 sidewalker on either side, and 1 leading the horse. She was completely nonverbal. And as he explained it to me, within about a month and a half, they saw her lips moving. And then they realized she was talking to the horse. And after she started talking to the horse, she started talking to the people. And now I'm talking to him, and she's actually in school with a computer, and she had tested out 3 weeks behind her peers. She has a speech therapist, and I see pictures of her now as a teenager. And yes, she has Downs, but she's not that far behind anyone. And I fully believe she'll be one of those Downs folks that has her own business if she's not just flying on a career. So that helped with the motivation of why I needed to be able to just be persistent and continue to do this. And I don't charge because so many families don't have the insurance that would cover it, and they don't have the funds to do it. And it does wonders for me, and it's great for the horses. I truly believe if they had been doing half of the diagnoses they do now, when I was growing up in the 50s, I was all over the place. I'm certainly ADHD. That's why I function so well in a combat zone. I'm much better when 8 things are going on than when nothing is going on, or when I only have 1 or 2 things to function. And I'm sure they would have over-medicated me. And one of the groups that we had come out, we have a place called the Riley Center in Huntsville that is for kids with autism. And so one summer they did a peer modeling program where you match up one student with one, quote, normal child. And we had probably, maybe 20 to 30 kids out here and twice as many parents. The parents were the issue, not the kids. But one of the kids went running up and lay down, face down on the concrete, and started screaming bloody murder. And he screamed for almost an hour and a half. And I would just step over him and keep going and do other stuff. And the mom came to me and she goes, I'm not used to anybody just being so mellow about this. And I said, the only difference between me and Michael is I am socialized to not act out what I would like to do. And right now, those 5 people, and I pointed at him, if I had my druthers, I'd be laying right next to him, screaming and beating my fists and my hand. And she busted out laughing. Now, this has been probably 6 years ago. Michael is in school. He is sending full texts to his mother. He still has challenges, but he will say, he loves his school. He gets worried if there's going to be a vacation time and he can't go in. He has got phenomenal one-on-one counselors with him. They did move so they could be in a better school zone, but I am watching this phenomenal kid and these wonderful people. She posts a good bit about her, this is normal to you. But the first time she got a full-blown text, and then it ended with, I love you, mommy. And he did it on his own. And then other times when he's been ill and he can't tell her, he uses the text and can tell her where he doesn't feel good. Or Poppy's gone, Poppy's house no more. So he's realized his grandfather has passed away. Things like that, the cognitive recognition that there were years ago, nobody knew if he'd reached that point. And he's progressing faster and faster. So it does wonders for my soul to be able to work with a lot of these folks and stay in touch with the parents. I will be setting things up if people want to donate, or a lot of people just donate. They don't donate, they put money on my feed account at the family farm feed store that I use, and people can ask me about that. And then if they're ever in the Huntsville, Alabama area, coordinate with me and come for a visit, because I love to have visitors. And these horses are my passion. Everybody's got a story. I'm more than happy to introduce you to each one of them. I have miniature donkeys and a miniature mule and miniature horses that love mini shredded wheats and will just talk to you all day long. And then it goes all the way up to almost 18 hands with a Percheron that I have here as well. So, and they range in age from about 3 months to 32 years.